Viewers, the ICE summit, the one in Alaska between Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, has ended. There were smiles, there were warm handshakes, but there was no deal. The Trump-Putin meeting broke the ice between the two leaders. No ceasefire has been announced. No agreement has been announced in terms of clear timelines, roadmap as to how the Russia-Ukraine conflict will end. There's a possibility of the next summit, the next meeting between the two leaders taking place in Moscow. How that pans out is something that we will decode right here for you on NDTV. But first up, let's play out exactly what the two leaders said after that very short press briefing that they took, where they came out with statements but did not take any questions. Listen in.
Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all.
As I've said, the situation in Ukraine has to do with fundamental threats to our security. Moreover, we've always considered the Ukrainian nation, and I've said it multiple times, a brotherly nation, however strange it may sound in these conditions. We have the same roots, and everything that's happening is a tragedy for us and terrible wound. Therefore, the country is sincerely interested in putting an end to it. At the same time, we're convinced that in order to make the settlement lasting and long-term, we need to eliminate all the primary roots, the primary causes of that conflict. And we've said it multiple times, to consider all legitimate concerns of Russia and to reinstate a just balance of security in Europe and in the world on the whole. And I agree with President Trump, as he has said today, that naturally the security of Ukraine should be ensured as well. Naturally, we're prepared to work on that.
I will say that I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them. They're going to have to agree with what Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who've come here, Scott and John Radcliffe, thank you very much. But we have some of our really great leaders. They've been doing a phenomenal job. We also have some tremendous Russian business representatives here, and I think, you know, everybody wants to deal with us. We've become the hottest country anywhere in the world in a very short period of time, and we look forward to that. We look forward to dealing. We're going to try and get this over with. We really made some great progress today. I've always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin, with Vladimir. We had many tough meetings, good meetings. We were interfered with by the Russia hoax. That made it a little bit tougher to deal with, but he understood it. I think he's probably seen things like that during the course of his career. He's seen it all, but we had to put up with the Russia hoax. He knew it was a hoax, and I knew it was a hoax, but what was done was very criminal. But it made it harder for us to deal as a country in terms of the business and all of the things that we'd like to have dealt with. But we'll have a good chance when this is over. So just to put it very quickly, I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them what happened. But we had an extremely productive meeting, and many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant, but we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I would like to thank President Putin and his entire team, whose faces, who I know in many cases, other than that, whose faces I get to see all the time in the newspapers. You're almost as famous as the boss, but especially this one right over here. But we had some good meetings over the years, right? Good, productive meetings over the years, and we hope to have that in the future. But let's do the most productive one right now. We're going to stop really 5, 6, 7,000, thousands of people a week from being killed. And President Putin wants to see that as much as I do. So, again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much. And we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all. Thank you.
I could see it possibly happening. Those are the final set of words that were exchanged between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump as they wrap things up in Anchorage in Alaska. And that really sets the stage for what lies ahead. Let's now quickly rope in a guest joining me this morning, Matt Klink, who's a Republican strategist, Sarah Clare, who is a professor and foreign policy commentator, and David K. Johnston, senior journalist, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining me on this special broadcast. And in fact, let me start with Matt and Sarah in terms of their opening comments. Even though there may not have been a ceasefire, there may not have been a cessation of hostilities, no roadmap, but clearly people now, the experts are talking who won and who got the better end of the deal in terms of the summit. Sarah, there is a growing sense that Vladimir Putin may have just come out with more potential wins that he will be taking back to Moscow with him.
I wouldn't say that. I think that, President Trump, his goal with this meeting was to find out what Putin wanted and what would bring him to the table with Ukraine. And we actually heard a little bit of that in the comments that he made at the podium, at the press conference, where he talked about wanting cooperation on tech and space and Arctic exploration. And he also said that he wanted to work towards an end to the Ukraine war. So I think we're finally possibly getting a sense of that, and that's what Trump was looking for. It was definitely, a disappointment that they weren't able to come to a better deal. But Trump did mention that he was going to be calling up the Europeans and the Ukrainians. So I also think we need to wait and see how those conversations go, because those are the people who matter in terms of moving this forward. So, we may be hearing more about this. It may evolve after Trump has those conversations.
All right, Matt, then let me ask you this. When those conversations happen with people who are directly affected by the Russia-Ukraine conflict, would they be happy with the next summit actually taking place in Moscow?
Well, I don't think that the next summit, that was a great response by Vladimir Putin, but I do not believe that Zelensky is going to go to Moscow to negotiate an end to the war. Trump may go to Moscow to talk about other things with Putin, but look, anyone who says that, or who thinks that they can predict a winner or a loser from what just happened is filling it full of their own ideological biases. I've heard everything from Putin has the advantage because Russia once owned Alaska to, the dimple in ties. Bottom line, nobody knows. The press event that they had was not a press conference. Both leaders made statements and got out of town quickly. There will ultimately be a readout that will happen, and at that point we'll be able to determine what, if anything, of consequence happened. I will tell you that on American TV just a few minutes ago that Donald Trump rated the meeting a 10, but he also said during his remarks that there is no deal until there is a deal, clearly indicating that nothing was solved. So again, anybody who says that Putin won or Trump won, it's just political posturing on their part. And that it's irrelevant.
Okay, it may seem irrelevant, but let's also remember that these two presidents, they're also political leaders. They go back to their constituency, their core base that they need to also address and speak to. And when Vladimir Putin goes back to Russia, to Moscow, to talk about how things pan out from here on, what will be the next step, the next roadmap, some of the messaging that came out during this summit will be equally important. David, which brings me to
I
ask
agree.
you that the summit is inconclusive. Where do we go from here in terms of the conflict? It continues. There is no cessation of hostilities. There is no ceasefire. And there is a certain military momentum that the Russian forces have right now.
Yeah,
You're
the things to watch for. The things to watch for going forward are going to be whether Trump holds back on providing weaponry and intelligence to the Ukrainians, which he's done in the past. We will, once Trump has spoken with leaders of several European nations, I would expect Keir Starmer to be key among those, things will start to leak out. You can't keep this secret once there's a growing circle of people, and we'll begin to hear more about what happened here. But don't miss the fact that Putin spoke first. He was grinning ear to ear, was clearly in a very good mood, and Putin's made clear what he wants. We're going to keep the territory we took by force as part of this deal. One of the issues I'm sure they did not resolve today is what about the 20,000 kidnapped Ukrainian children that Russia is now trying to parcel out as adoptees to make them Russians. That would clearly have to be part of any settlement. But yeah, within a few days, I think we'll have a fairly good picture of just what went on in that room. We should be very glad that Trump did not meet alone with Putin as originally proposed, with only a translator, likely a Russian translator in the room. Marco Rubio and some others from the State Department were there. So we do have
but there was also that very brief but very important. There was also that very brief but very important ride that the two leaders took in the Beast. So whatever, if they wanted to speak to each other, they had that. I don't know, that may be a 10-minute window or 8-minute window, whatever, but that window did exist.
It certainly is window dressing for Putin to have ridden in the Beast. And in that way, in a PR sense, diplomatic PR sense, Putin did very well today.
And Vladimir Putin also looked up as the B-2 and 4 F-35s flew overhead, and at a base that's being used for a military operation being run right now in the northern part of the world. So, I mean, look, there's PR going all the way around here. So let's just say, I can tell you're not a Trump fan because you're focusing on look, I mean, Putin didn't get what he wanted either, and Donald Trump still has primary and secondary sanctions that he can impose if he doesn't get closer to what he wants. So let's not look at this just from one perspective. There are two sides to the story, and we're both guessing on what happens because only two people know ultimately what happened, and it will leak out once those conversations start happening, but we don't know right now.
Okay, we don't know.
Actually, thankfully, it's more than two because Trump did not go alone to the 2.5-hour meeting as he did in previous meetings where he said he trusted Putin and took him at his word and did not trust American intelligence agencies.
Okay, that was far back in time.
Do you mean the same intelligence agencies that leaked information about Donald Trump?
No, it was far back in time. It was far back in time. Viewers, David K. Johnston is talking about the 2018 summit in Helsinki between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin that resulted in that, many would say, a very stunning news conference that followed where several allegations that were made by the American intel officials were not accepted by President Trump. But remember, this is not about that. This is not about that. You know, I don't want to talk about that domestic affairs of America so far back in time.
But you just brought it up.
I want to talk about what happened today because this impacts not just America and Russia or Ukraine or Europe. This impacts the world. And that is why it's so important for the world to probably know what happens from here on. And Sarah, that's what I want to come to you. We can keep debating. There will always be two sides to who won, who came out as a winner, who goes back to talk about potential wins from this summit. But the larger point is that the summit was inconclusive in terms of providing any opportunity or a roadmap to end the conflict. And that is the largest and biggest takeaway of this. Sarah?
We don't know that yet.
I would say that, Putin, the fact that Trump went to the press conference with Putin Trump would not have done that if he felt like Putin was wasting his time. So I'm taking that as a positive sign. In terms of ending the war or, making progress towards a ceasefire, there's definitely more work that needs to be done on that. I think it's also important to take into consideration the comments that Putin made about, hoping that Europe and Ukraine don't interfere with the progress that's been made. And I think that was a very interesting point to focus on, because the Europeans, Ukraine is in the war, so that's different. But the Europeans have been sticking their noses in this from the very beginning, and it has mostly turned out to be unproductive. So, I do wonder how Trump is going to handle that. That is a question that I think we'll all be looking at is Trump going to be able to manage the relationship with Europe and the relationship with Russia in order to move this forward?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Matt, you were making a point in terms of the fact that you disagree that this summit was inconclusive. You have a different view there?
Yeah, we don't know if it was inconclusive. We'll probably know within the next 4 to 6 hours a heck of a lot more. But if progress was made, then it wasn't inconclusive. There was never going to be an end to the war. And I hate to break it to everyone who thinks that Russia is going to get territory back, especially the Crimea that the Russians have held since 2014 when Barack Obama was president. That ain't happening. They may swap some territory in eastern Ukraine, but Ukraine is going to lose territory, and this war ultimately needs to end. America is no longer going to fund this war.
So, Matt, I have one disagreement with you, irrespective of whatever may be the contours at whatever point of time that the world may finalize. If there was a deal today, if there was any agreement, I would like to believe, and I'm sure many viewers watching this would agree, that Donald Trump would have most certainly announced that. And for him to say there is no deal is something that pretty much says that there are 2 points that exist right now. And David, let me then
And if he had struck a deal, you would have said that Vladimir Putin wasn't there. This is a bad deal.
No,
so
I'm not
there wasn't going to be a deal.
And I'm most certainly not a Trump spokesperson either, sir. I'm just saying from the point of view of millions of people watching this broadcast around the world who would be thinking that this was a very anticipated and important meeting. And what happens next? And, that's the larger point. The roadmap is up in the air. It hasn't been identified. And the sense one gets is that it is likely to potentially be firmed up when Donald Trump speaks to his allies in Europe. That's the broader sense we get.
Correct.
That's when it could probably be firmed up. But then, David, let me then ask you about the critical minerals aspect. Many feel that could really be the big X factor in terms of how the Trump administration would view the talks from here on from a bilateral point of view between US and Russia.
Well, remember that Donald wanted the Ukrainians to pay America for defending against Russian aggression, something which Republicans always were opposed to until Donald Trump. They believed in freedom and liberty, not giving in to dictators, especially from Moscow. Now, Trump believes that there's a lot of mineral wealth he wants the U.S. to get in Ukraine. I don't know why we would have any right to it. He's also relying on 1950s Stalin-era geological reports that may not be at all reliable. There are lots of dimensions to this beyond the immediate talk. India has an interest in this because India has been benefiting from the war by getting Russian oil at about 20% below the world price. That's been great for the Indian economy and India's efforts to restore itself as the wealthiest country in the world. But if there is an end to this transaction, to the sanctions that the Trump administration has placed on, and some of the ones from the Biden era that continue, India will pay a price for this as well by paying 25% more for the oil than it's paying now. But I think we'll find out quite quickly what happened here, what the outlines of the deal are. My principal concern as an American is this would be the first time an American president and Republicans have bowed down to a naked aggression by a dictator who was subject to a treaty to never invade Ukraine, and how anybody with a moral conscience can side with anything but forcing Putin out is difficult for me to comprehend. And you know, I've been covering Donald for almost 40 years, know him very well, negotiated with him very successfully every time, and have covered lots of complex issues. And this is a whole new development of Republicans who want to cut and run rather than stand up for liberty and freedom.
All right. I'm going to take a quick break and we come back. Request all of you to stay with us. We come back on the broadcast. Remember, going into this meeting, Donald Trump said high stakes. 2 words, 3 exclamation marks. We come back and ask how things stand right now after that high stakes meeting. And most importantly, talk about the subtle messaging from rolling the red carpet to laying flowers at that World War II memorial that Putin did. What's the messaging there? We come back and talk on that and much more. Stay with us. Welcome back, viewers. Tuning in right now, the big story that NDTV has been on top of, viewers, is the Alaska summit between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. It ended a short while back. Though it's been inconclusive, it has led to some positivity in terms of the possibility of ending the Russia-Ukraine conflict. What you're seeing right now on your screens are essentially the visuals, the warm welcome that Vladimir Putin got on the red carpet. Donald Trump was waiting for him. He clapped and then shook his hand. Also, the two leaders rode together in the Beast. That is the name of the vehicle of the American president. Originally, the two leaders were supposed to meet one-on-one. That meeting then became one which had the delegations on both sides, but the two leaders did get to speak one-on-one in that short ride that you see on your screens, that visual that's playing with the two leaders being in the Beast. Did they speak much? Is anybody's guess, but the two leaders like the style of speaking one-on-one. And lastly, the presser, the short presser, the press conference where they did not take any questions, but paved the way for a possible second summit that could take place in Moscow. Donald Trump said that he will get a lot of heat for it, but he also said he will work around it. That will send shockwaves around most European capitals, with the possibility of a second summit actually taking place in Moscow. I want to first play out that soundbite, exactly what Donald Trump said, with Vladimir Putin hinting next time in Moscow. And then we're also going to play out what is it that Vladimir Putin said at that short but very important press briefing. And then we come back and talk more with our panel of guests.
Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all.
As I've said, the situation in Ukraine has to do with fundamental threats to our security. Moreover, we've always considered the Ukrainian nation, and I've said it multiple times, a brotherly nation, however strange it may sound in these conditions. We have the same roots, and everything that's happening is a tragedy for us and terrible wound. Therefore, the country is sincerely interested in putting an end to it. At the same time, we're convinced that in order to make the settlement lasting and long-term, we need to eliminate all the primary roots, the primary causes of that conflict. And we've said it multiple times, to consider all legitimate concerns of Russia and to reinstate a just balance of security in Europe and in the world on the whole. And I agree with President Trump, as he has said today, that naturally the security of Ukraine should be ensured as well. Naturally, we're prepared to work on that.
Matt Klink, Republican strategist, Sarah Clare, professor and foreign policy commentator, as well as David K. Johnston, senior journalist, all joining me live on the broadcast to talk more about the Alaska summit inconclusive but positive. Now, we've played out some of these pictures for our viewers to better understand the optics, the narrative, what really went into these meetings, and most importantly, what could be the takeaways for these two leaders, for these two countries. But, I want to ask this to all three of you, which is that what happens next now? Apart from the shockwaves in almost all European capitals about the possibility of a second summit in Moscow, besides that, what happens next? Let me start with you, Matt. The two leaders have departed. Anchorage was the host. Now they've both flown out. Things have wrapped up in Anchorage. It comes back now to Moscow and Washington, D.C. What happens next from here on?
Yeah, I think that what's next, if this thing has any legs for the future, is that there needs to be a second meeting at a to be determined location that I can pretty much guarantee is not going to be in Moscow.
Okay. Sarah, to you next, then how things are now likely to pan out from here on? And how soon do you think there could be a second step here? Because Donald Trump had said all along that if there is no positive meeting, I'm going to walk out. I'm going to figure that out in just a couple of minutes. After that, I'm going to keep moving if nothing happens. So by the looks of it, this is the longest time that he and Vladimir Putin have spoken. So by the looks of it, by his own metric, he would consider this meeting to be, if not a success, at least positive. So how soon do you think the next step, the next meeting, the next phone call, any of that is likely to take place?
I think if it's going to take place, it's got to happen very soon to protect this progress and make sure, that they keep everybody focused. I've said before, mediating this conflict is kind of like herding cats because both these leaders, Putin and Zelensky, are very easily distracted and drawn back into a conflict mode or a mode where they really don't want to talk to each other. So it's got to happen very quickly, hopefully within the next couple weeks.
Okay. Now, David, then let me bring you in on the other aspect as far as the India impact of this is concerned. We in India are also looking very closely at this meeting. And in fact, just hours before that meeting was to start in Alaska, Donald Trump actually said that Vladimir Putin is coming to talk because of the Russian sanctions that have been imposed and because of the fresh set of sanctions I'm imposing on import of Russian oil. So there was a certain hardening of posture that happened before that meeting. None of it, of course, seemed to reflect in the body language between the two leaders, which was very warm and cordial. But from that point of view, the sanctions, the import of Russian oil, the frustration that Donald Trump felt in terms of not getting a ceasefire and therefore not getting that Nobel, how is that likely to now pan out from here?
Well, first of all, they're going to have to move very quickly if they want to get somewhere with this plan, whatever it is, because the longer it's out there and as things begin to leak out from European governments and perhaps the Ukrainian government, there'll be wedges driven about this. So I absolutely agree with Professor Clare that they've got to move quite quickly here if they're going to reach some kind of an agreement. At the same time, we need to keep in mind that Donald would like to extend this in some ways because he needs desperately a diversion from the issue of you promised to make the files of the sexual predator Jeffrey Epstein public, and they've gone to great lengths not to make them public. And Donald, as I've said on your station before, cannot survive any irrefutable evidence that he is a child rapist. He can survive everything else, but he can't survive clear evidence that he's a child rapist. So Donald has a different set of interests here, but I think getting to the next stage and either we go somewhere or we don't is overwhelmingly likely. And by next stage, days, no more than a week or two.
So what you're saying is domestic politics will also dictate how soon Donald Trump wants to act on this. But this has also been the big foreign policy goal of his government ever since he came to power. In fact, even in his on his campaign trail, he said that if he was in power, these wars would either not have happened or would have ended in 24 hours. He said that, though, of course, this is probably the longest 24 hours in history, because he said that even on day one, that I'm going to end those conflicts in 24 hours. Now, Matt, we've spoken about the specifics of these, of the meeting, the very little details that we have right now besides the optics. And I'm going to now come to the specifics as to reason why many feel that Putin is, while Donald Trump is definitely not losing out in this meeting, the optics are very much warm and cordial. But Putin may go home to have more wins under this belt. Also, two things. One, the fact that this was a very warm welcome on American soil. The fact that he rode in the beast. We're playing out those visuals. The fact that he also laid flowers at that Soviet-era cemetery to make a point about the Soviet soldiers during the Second World War. All of that adds up to the optics. He also got to speak first. When was the last time that a foreign leader actually got to speak first ahead of the host leader?
Well, I'm willing to bet that he spoke first because Donald Trump allowed him to do that. Look, this whole day was stage managed by the Trump people. From everything from the walk up with the Alaska 2025 and the jets parked on either side of the red carpet to the B-2 bomber flying overhead. Vladimir Putin doesn't have that. And he knows he doesn't have that. And he is also very keenly aware of what Donald Trump just used maybe that very same B-2 bomber to do to Iran's nuclear capacity. So from that perspective, it was a public relations show of force by America. But look, Vladimir Putin is a savvy politician of his own right, perhaps even more shrewd than Donald Trump. He knew what he wanted out of this. And I got to believe that he got it. Both men were happy. I mean, look at it this way. You have two apex type A males of the maximum level, both meeting with each other, representing two of the three world's superpowers. So again, this was diplomacy on the highest matter. And I think that, again, Donald Trump got what he wanted out of it. Putin got what he wanted out of it, and it will be up to, ultimately to the spinmeisters and to whatever comes out of this meeting to determine who ultimately won or lost. Mm-hmm. My guess is that there will be a continuation of talks, and hopefully it yields to progress. But America's not going to continue to stroke checks to the Ukrainians for a war that they're never going to win.
Right, and you spoke about the warm handshakes. The two alpha males that they met, they're pretty much of the same alpha male type, I would say. And let's play out that images that we have of them sharing that handshake and in fact sharing a laugh there. Those are visuals after the press briefing. Both of them are sharing a laugh there. And it really did seem like a very cordial meeting between the two leaders. Ended on the note on which it pretty much started, which is where Donald Trump rolled the red carpet and clapped, waited for Putin. And that's exactly the same body language, the same bonhomie you see here as well. Both of them sharing a laugh after that briefing. A quick break, viewers. On that note, we come back with our rolling coverage of this big story. Viewers, the big story that we are tracking, the ICE summit, the Alaska meeting between Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin ended inconclusive. It was the longest time that the two leaders had met face to face. There were warm welcomes, handshakes, red carpet, and in fact, a ride in the beast as well. The two leaders managed to meet away from the delegations with which they had those detailed talks, and the press conference that they held after their meeting. Short, crisp, but left with probably one of the biggest headlines, which was that a second potential meeting could take place in Moscow. Something that sent shockwaves across European capitals, most of them dreading the possibility of any potential discussions to take place on Russian soil. Let's get in Maha Siddiqui, my colleague who's been tracking this meeting from Anchorage, joining us live. Now, Maha, things are wrapping up where you were at Anchorage. The visuals tell the story. While the meeting may have been inconclusive, warm handshakes to some red carpet welcome to a potential Moscow summit. By all accounts, this looks like a meeting that both the leaders wanted ideally to have ended just this way.
Yes, it appears to be so, Gauri, and it also brings to us a very important question on whether this meeting was only about Ukraine or whether Ukraine was used as an excuse for US and Russia to thrash out some bilateral issues between them as well and discuss some critical bilateral issues like trade, commerce, like trade in tech, as well as cooperation in other sectors. Specifically, something that was being speculated here very widely, although it was dismissed as a mere speculation, the cooperation between the two on critical minerals. Now, these aspects are now appearing to have been taken up in the meeting as well, because there was a mention of that by President Putin. And the bonhomie of sorts that was shown on the red carpet, the two handshakes, one for the cameras, one when Putin got off the aircraft, and also the manner in which President Trump shook his hand, using both his hands at one point to shake his hands warmly, the red carpet welcome, the ride in the beast. All of these optics are also very much speaking about the meeting today, which yielded no result for Ukraine, because there hasn't even been a ceasefire that could be announced from this meeting. And we are not even sure at the moment whether this will lead to a second meeting, as had been pointed out earlier by President Trump, that there could be a meeting with the Ukrainian side, Ukrainian president, the Russian side, US, and even perhaps some European partners in that meeting to get an all-encompassing view and then lead towards a peace deal. If we are to believe what has been said today in the joint press conference with regards to agreements on some points, President Trump said that there were several points on which there was agreement, and critically on one point, but it was not outlined what exactly it was.
Indeed, this has been a major speculation that the larger discussion, the bilateral discussion between US and Russia was likely to be the overarching theme, with Ukraine being one of the many things, one of the many issues that the two leaders wish to discuss. And Sarah, let me get your quick view on that as well, that it was largely about US and Russia, with the Ukraine conflict being just one of the many themes that the two leaders wish to address.
Yeah, I think that the economic incentives that were discussed was still part of the Ukraine negotiations, at least from the U.S. perspective, because Russia's economy is really struggling. Their own foreign or finance ministry, has put out that they have labor shortages, they have inflation. So what, Donald Trump knows that, and he came to this meeting prepared to bring some solutions for President Putin. It just remains to be seen if Putin is smart enough to take advantage of those offers. I think by the fact that he came to the meeting, that hopefully that means he is.
All right, I'm going to leave it there. Sarah Claire, Matt Klink, and David K. Johnston joining me live on the broadcast. Thank you so much for your perspective on the big story that NDTV has been tracking, which is the Alaska summit. It has ended, no deal, even as things seem to be headed towards a positive outcome. When that will be, how soon it will be, what will be the shape of that, the roadmap to that remains unclear, but the red carpet indicates that the chances of that happening are higher than ever before. On that note, a quick break. We return with our rolling coverage. Stay with us. The Alaska summit may have broken the ice between Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, but did not lead to any conclusive decision as far as the conflict is concerned. But let's get you some images, some visuals that tell you that the two leaders did strike a chord there. That is Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, sharing a laugh after their joint press conference. There were handshakes, there's light chatter that followed the historical meeting after it was officially over. That tells you that there was bonhomie at play, just that it did not really lead to any ceasefire, any formal deal, but potentially pave the way or set the stage for that to happen in the next summit that may take place between the two leaders soon. All right, on that note, a quick break, viewers. We return with more stories, more updates, and more stories on the other side.